Hi, everyone. This is Diane Dobry, and this is Intentions. This is about intentions related to writing things down and saying them out loud, and how I came to understand that there was a connection there, because I had been doing things, but was not aware that there was a connection to my thoughts and the actual occurrence of things. So around 2002, I had read a book called Write It Down, Make It Happen by Henriette Klauser, which was one step on my way to understanding that it is possible to set intentions and manifest and fill needs through those intentions. As I said, I've already had been making intentions and unknowingly setting things in motion. Earlier that year, I had applied for a Fulbright scholarship to go to Germany and Belgium for a month. Actually, I had applied the year before, and I just knew I would get it if I applied, and I did get it. And it was in 2002 that I went to Germany and Belgium for a month. It was such a great experience because everything was paid for, everything was arranged, hotels, meals, spending money, transportation. And after that experience, I had read Shonia Choquette's book, Creative Visualization, in which she says to visualize what you want to see happen and surround it in a pink bubble and send that bubble in your mind, your mind's eye, up to the higher realms, to heaven, to God, etc. And I would sit in my hot tub where I could relax. And there is a connection in Henriette Klauser's book, in Write It Down, Make It Happen, a connection to water. And when you take a shower, and there's a lot in her book. So I do recommend getting that book. And I recommend Shonia Choquette's book on creative visualization, because there are different rituals that they both talk about. I would sit in the hot tub in the dark at night, and I would just relax, and I would picture this pink bubble, and I would put in my requests and then imagine it going up with the steam from the hot tub. So after this trip that I took to Germany and Belgium, I said that I wanted to get a grant of some kind every year so I could go to Europe for free and everything would be covered. And a couple of years later, I ended up wanting to go to Hungary to do some research for my doctorate, and I got a grant that paid for my flight to and from Hungary. And I was able to do research for the summer. I stayed with friends while I was there. And after that, I got another grant to spend a month in Hungary learning the language and the culture at an institute, which came in handy at that time because I had been laid off and unemployed for 2 years. And I was running out of money to live on in the US. I got this grant that covered 3 meals a day, a place to live and sleep, and lessons on the language, field trips around the country. But it turned out a friend of mine had an apartment right down the street that was empty. And because I was probably 20 years older than most of the people in this program, I stayed in my friend's apartment where I could sleep there. I could cook if I wanted to. I didn't have much money. And I did get free food at the institute, which was right down the block. But right after that, the same friend with the apartment had talked to someone there and helped me get a job teaching in Hungary. So when I went there, I was a little nervous. I didn't know anyone in this town. And, yes, it was teaching in English, so the other people did speak English, but I had an apartment that was completely furnished. It They gave me the apartment as part of my job. They gave me bus passes, so I had transportation. I got a cell phone, everything I needed in the apartment, including an oven, a washing machine, a computer, um, internet, television, everything that I would need was in the apartment. And they paid me a salary as well. They also had money for me to go on to a conference. So I ended up going to a conference across the country later in the year. Yeah, it was amazing. Everything was given to me. I had nothing. I had no job. I was given this job, and I did have the salary. It was nominal. It covered food and travel back to the US. I did have health insurance in the country, which I needed because I ended up in the hospital. But I haven't gotten a grant every year, but I have gotten travel paid for quite a lot. And I do have more stories about that travel that was paid for. And I'll talk about that in an upcoming podcast, since it is more recent, and it involves how sometimes negative occurrences end up being the answer to an intention that we have. So yeah, that's a really interesting story that I'll do on a future podcast. But after I read Write It Down, Make It Happen, I did one of the rituals that the book talks about, which is apparently based on a Native American ritual to be done on the day before New Year's Day. So it's done before sunrise on December 31st, the last day of the year. And it has to do with 3 red feathered arrows, 3 black feathered arrows, tobacco, and written intentions. So what she wrote in the book was that at the New Year or the solstice, many Native American cultures had a special celebration where they would ask the Great Spirit to eliminate specific things that they no longer wanted in their lives, and to bring things in that they now wanted to have in their lives. And the ritual was that they would use 6 arrows, 3 death arrows, which represented things that they did not want, that they were ready to give up, and 3 life arrows for things that they did want to bring into their lives for that upcoming year. The death arrows were to be put into the dirt in an area on low ground, surrounded by a circle made with tobacco leaves. And they would step into the circle from the north. You would have an opening at the north, put the arrows in the ground, and say silent prayers. And as you say the prayers, you concentrate on the things that you want to give up or be rid of. And then those arrows were to be burned, and the smoke would send the signal to the Great Spirit of, taking away these intentions. Then they would go to higher ground and create a similar tobacco circle, and they would leave the opening on that circle to the south. And they would go into the new circle and put the arrows for the life arrows in, and ask the Great Spirit for what they wanted to bring into their lives. And those arrows were left standing for the Great Spirit throughout the year. So the first year, Klauser and her friends, I think she did it with a friend, and she had some of her, I think she had a daughter, a couple of daughters that did this ceremony, but instead of arrows, which they didn't have, they used sticks made from willow branches, twigs of willow branches, and they tied ribbons to the ends to represent the feathers. And Klauser was living in California at the time, so she couldn't burn the arrows when she did her ceremony because she lived in an area where there was a burn ban. So she did the ceremony with the group, and they wrote out their requests and taped them onto the willow branches. They read the requests out loud, and instead of burning the sticks, they buried the willow branches to represent that they wanted to bury those past things that they wanted to be rid of. They also didn't want to leave the life arrow sticks, the positive red feathered ones where someone could find them with the taped requests on the sticks. So they also buried those arrows after saying the intentions out loud. So they kind of adjusted the ritual to their current needs and the current rules and culture. So I decided to do this ritual. Probably, I think it was around 2002. I didn't I didn't have like a higher ground and lower ground on my property. It was fairly flat. So I was trying to think where I could go, and especially before sunrise on December 31st. And I lived near a state park. So I thought, well, I'll go there. And I know, it was kind of, up and down. There were hilly areas. And I went at 5:30 in the morning, and it was really dark. And there was a gate at the entrance that was closed. So I had to park at the entrance, and I parked outside, brought my arrows, which I made from wooden skewers, and I taped black paper for the death arrows on the tops. And for the life arrows, I taped red paper to represent the feathers. I also wrote my requests down, but instead of burning, because I was on a state park land and I didn't want to draw attention to myself being there, since I kind of snuck around the gate and there had been a car going by when I got there. So I didn't want somebody like accusing me of setting a fire. So I just thought I'll just bury the requests near the arrows. And I had purchased a bag of good tobacco from a smoke shop that I used to make the circle around these arrows. And I read the requests to take things out of my life. And then I went to higher ground and did the red arrows in a circle. And I also buried those requests. I didn't want to be there too long, as I said. So I left, and it was cold and snowy. And I went home, and later on, I told my mother-in-law, who came over, about what I had done on New Year's Eve day. And she's like, why would you do that? Why don't you pray to Jesus like everybody else does? And I thought that was hysterical, because it just never would have occurred to her to do a Native American ritual. But I wanted to do it to make it more of an intention. This is my intention. I'm doing this ritual, and it was something new. So it was more, there was more of a focus on this new ritual. And Klauser said that she and her friends had gone home and written down the requests from the arrows in a journal, so they could go back to the journal and look at the requests later on to see how it played out. And I also did that. And I drew pictures of what I had hoped for, and I folded up the paper. I still have it somewhere. And they had amazing results. I mean, really, the intentions came true, and it not only came true, but it came beyond their expectations. And I know for me that most of my requests have happened, not all. But the act of writing it down was what gave the intention a seriousness, Klauser says in her book. And that's what's worked for me. Because even before this ritual, I had written things in my diary, and I have 50 years of diaries. And now I have some that are specifically designated as gratitude diaries. On one page, I put what I'm grateful for, and the other page, I put what I want to bring into my life. So it's being thankful for what I have, but also having, being open to further blessings. And I'll talk about that in a future podcast as well. But I have written things down that I want to get. And I found that these things would be offered to me or come into my own life in synchronous ways that, I didn't go out deliberately making it happen. I just said, that's what I need. This is what I want. And at some point, I'll get it. And I never figured out how I was going to do it. I just knew that this was going to happen, and I was open to whatever needed to happen to make it come into my life. But it was amazing over time in the way that things happen, because just in the last few months, I can give examples of things I've asked out loud and written down related to needs that I have or requests that I wanted to make, and I've gotten them. So, I mean, just since November of 2021, I had a need for $300 to take a class online. And I said out loud that I was requesting, I live alone. So I just said, I need $300. I'm asking that this money would come to me. Specifically, I asked for it to come from a writing job because I knew I had pitched several magazines with story ideas. And most of the time, I'm ignored. I never hear from them, or I'm turned down, or I get things that don't pay a lot of money. So it was a big ask, but I said, I'm willing to do this and I can do this writing. So if I could get money from some magazines to help me pay for this class online, that would be great. I would really be grateful for that. And I needed to know within a week because the price of this class would go up, or I think even the offer was closing. So I needed to know within a week if I could sign up for the class and pay $300. And I wrote that down also in my journal. The next day, I received an email from a major magazine. I had never written for a major magazine and gotten paid for it. And they offered me $1 per word to write a 350-word article. So not only did I get $350 or my answer immediately, which was fascinating to me, which it was amazing to me. I got more than I asked for. I got $350, which allowed me to sign up for that within the week. But I also have been wanting to get more legitimacy as a writer of being able to say I've been published in this or that major magazine. So it added another level to other intentions I've had hopes for. And it was part of my request that I wanted the money to come from a pitch that I had made to a magazine. So, I mean, it was very specific and it came immediately. So I did sign up for the class, and I had that happen once before. I had lost my job because my teaching contract had ended and they weren't rehiring me as an adjunct and they didn't have a permanent position for me. So I needed to save money because I wasn't sure when I would have my next job, but I wanted to go to a conference, and it was a writing conference, and I wanted to meet with some agents to pitch some ideas. And I wrote it in my journal that I needed $500 to go to this conference. Being out of work, you don't want to just take $500 and go to a conference. But I thought, perhaps it would move things along for potential writing, publishing contract. So I asked for the money, and if I was meant to go to that conference, help me find $500. And that week I was cleaning out my apartment and I found some old jewelry. So I went to a jewelry store to see if there was anything gold in there, and really most of it was just some small cheap earrings or rings that were not worth very much money. And I also had an old charm bracelet from my ex-husband's family that ended up coming to me. Never wore it. I just said, oh, I'll bring this too. And the jeweler put it on a scale and he said, well, I can give you $500 for this. And I was like, what? How much? $500? So there was my $500. So more recently in December, I was talking to my grandson on FaceTime, and I was asking him what he wanted for Christmas. And then I said, do you know what I want for Christmas? And he said, what? And I said, I want a Bluetooth speaker. And he says, oh, Daddy just won a Bluetooth speaker and he doesn't need it. So he was going to give it away. So he gave it away to me. And I got my Bluetooth speaker as soon as I put it out there. And that was written down. I have a list now in my yearly planner. It's like needs and wants. And I just write my list down. So I put my Bluetooth speaker on the list. So I have an Audible subscription and I get 1 credit per month and I get a book every month. I'm in a book club. So I was hoping to get an Amazon card because I had so many other books that I wanted to get, but sometimes they're like, 15, 20 something dollars. And I just thought, oh, I just hope I get an Amazon card so I can get a bunch of books. And I didn't tell anyone about it. I wrote it down that I wanted an Amazon card to get some books. And Christmas came and I could not spend Christmas with my kids because they all had COVID. And so a couple of months later, around my birthday in February, I went to visit them. And when I got there on the way home from the airport, on the way to my son's house from the airport, he said, oh, by the way, I accidentally signed up for a subscription to Audible books last year. And I never knew it. I just was checking my credit card and I saw that I have 11 credits for Audible books. And he goes, I'm not going to use it. Do you use it? And I'm like, yeah, I listen to books all the time. So it was worth over $150, but he couldn't get a refund by that time. He just stopped the requests for more books. And I got 11 new books for my birthday. And then recently I needed a citrus juicer. I squeeze fresh orange juice, but I was doing it by hand and it was really tedious. And I had a citrus juicer in the past, but had moved and didn't bring it with me. And I said out loud, I sure could use a juicing machine to juice my oranges. And then I was in the bathroom and I was taking a shower and I said, oh, I need a new shower curtain too. And I like the clear, nice heavy duty plastic shower curtains that are clear so the light can come in. And I said that out loud to myself and to the spirit world. And that same day, my neighbor said that she was given some things from someone down the street who was moving. And she opened her trunk of her car and she showed me. And in the trunk of the car, she had a clear shower curtain and that was not used. And I said, oh, I definitely can use that. And then she had a citrus juicer. And I said, oh, I need one of those. And she goes, oh, well, I was going to use it. It's never been used. And it was kind of a plastic one. And she gave me a couple of other things. She had gone back about a half an hour later and I get a knock on my door and she says, oh, the woman gave me another juicer. She had another one and it was a higher end one. It was made of metal, but she had already used. And I think there was a little piece, broken off, but it still worked really, really well. And I was like, she's like, do you want this juicer? I said, sure. And now I have this great high-end citrus juicer. Same day that I asked for it. And then the last thing I asked for was a vacuum cleaner because the only thing I had was an old tiny vacuum that hardly picked up anything. And I wanted a larger one just because I have a carpet in my bedroom and I have this old area rug that just gets a lot of little lint and crumbs and sand and dirt. And the small vacuum never picks up everything. I end up picking it up with my fingers. But I didn't want to buy a large vacuum because I bought them in the past and every time I get one, I give it away and then I move and I need another one. So that day, the other day after I had vacuumed with my little vacuum cleaner that didn't work, the same neighbor invited me to go to the store with her. And she opened the garage and there was a Hoover vacuum cleaner sitting in the garage next to the car. And I said, oh, is that a vacuum cleaner or is it a carpet shampooer? And she said, no, it's a vacuum cleaner. It was my granddaughter's, but when she moved, she had no room for it in her car. So I didn't want her to throw it away. So I held on to it in case someone needed one. And she said, do you need one? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, it's yours. So that was the last thing I got. That's just an example of saying it, knowing it, that it's gonna come to you and just trusting that what you need is out there and it can come to you. I will have more stories to come about cleansing what I learned about cleansing and receiving as a result of that. Also, how sometimes negative situations can lead to a better situation, and it all comes from believing that it's the answer to what you're trying to manifest. Thanks for listening, and if you have any of your own stories that you'd like to share, I'd be happy to read them or let you tell your own story on intentions.